this is part 2 of this series, talking about series, if we can even call it a series when there's only 2 videos, but whatever. This one, I'm talking about series that I don't necessarily recommend binge reading. I mean, you can if you want to, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend it. I spoke about series that I would recommend binge reading in this video up here, so you can go and check that out if you would like to. Some of these I have binge read before, but I wouldn't necessarily recommend that for a first time read. This will make sense in a minute. So we'll start off with one of those first, and that is the Stormlight Archive by Brandon Sanderson. Yes, I'm taking the opportunity to show off my lovely, fancy, leather-bound editions of these books because they're beautiful and I might as well show them off occasionally. This series is, as you may know, an epic fantasy series. Each book is well over 1,000 pages long and it's very dense, and not in terms of writing style but in terms of content. There's a lot of foreshadowing going on, there's a lot of plot, there's a lot of characters. Not as many as some of these series, which I'll get into in a minute, but some of it is a little bit difficult to get your head around, and I think for a first time read through I would recommend taking your time with it. I should really listen to my own advice sometimes, but I am advising you to take your time with this series, and especially if you are into the Cosmere and you want to pick up on all of the Cosmere references that come up here, I would recommend going slowly, reading through it at a pace that feels comfortable to you rather than binge reading it. I do say that binge reading on reread though can be quite fun. So that's that one. The next one is a don't binge read it for a different reason, and that's The Poppy War by R.F. Kuang. I haven't yet finished this series, I've only read this first one. I'm planning to read the second one soon, but this is quite dark fantasy. It's essentially based on the Opium Wars and the rape of Nanking, and it's just got quite heavy topics, and so I don't necessarily think it would be particularly good for your mental health to read through the entire trilogy back to back. I mean, you can if you want to, but I would say maybe not. Same thing for this one, which is the Broken Earth trilogy by N.K. Jemisin, book 1 being the 5th season. This one, again, I've only read the first book in this trilogy so far because, once again, very, very dark. Even darker than this one, actually, I would say. There are trigger warnings for just about everything you could possibly think of, and I'm not especially sensitive to content usually, but this one really got me hard. Plus the writing style is quite dense. Some people get on really well with it. I am not one of those people, so I would say exercise caution with this series and don't necessarily plan to read them back to back, because I think that that would just be really, really difficult to do with this particular trilogy. Then we have a very long series which probably doesn't need much introduction at this point because there's so much buzz around it, and that is the Wheel of Time series by Robert Jordan, book 1 being The Eye of the World. And there's nothing particularly wrong with this series that would stop you from wanting to binge read it, aside from the fact that it's 14 books and you'd be feeling like you were reading it forever, which is one reason not to binge read it, I suppose. But also, again, I find the writing style a little bit more difficult to deal with. It's not necessarily easy reading in particular. It can be a bit descriptive, it can be a little bit meandering in terms of plot, and I have found, and I've only read the first 4 books, but I have found so far that it can be a little bit on the repetitive side. So I did have every intention of reading one of these books each month until I finished it, and I just cannot do that at all. I need breaks away from this series just because of the way that it is written. And where I said before that Stormlight has a lot of characters, that is nothing on this. It's well known that this series has just thousands of named characters, and many of them are actually relevant, so it's a tricky one. On a slightly more positive spin, a series that I recommend taking your time with is the Wayfarers series by Becky Chambers. Not because they aren't bingeable, but because they're such feel-good books that I feel like spreading them out over time and using them as kind of comfort reads or pick-me-up type reads is a really good idea. They're very slice of life, and although they're set in space, they're not really very sci-fi heavy. It's more about characters engaging with each other and being friends and learning to sympathise with each other and engage with each other in a positive way despite their differences, and it's really just an uplifting series. So I think it's one to have on hand when you feel like you need a little bit of hope in humanity. This series will do that for you. Similarly, there is the Heartstopper series by Alice Oseman. This is a graphic novel series which you probably have heard of. There is going to be a Netflix series of this one coming out in April, I think. Maybe I'm making that up, but I think it's April. And you can very easily binge read these books very easily. They're graphic novels, they're quick and easy to read, but again, they're so feel good and they will put a smile on your face that it's good to have them there. And I mean, they're great for rereading as well, so you could just binge read it and then slowly reread them if you wanted to. But I think that these are really good for, once again, that uplifting, giving you back some faith in humanity type feeling. And then finally, let us end on an epic fantasy, because this is me after all. We have the Farcia trilogy by Robin Hobb. Now, I loved these and I did actually read them pretty close together. Didn't quite binge read them, but I mean, I virtually did. I think I read them 1 month after the other, but they are a little bit more on the dense side. Robin Hobb has a slightly more literary writing style. It's not purple prose by any means, but it is a bit more kind of detailed than, say, Sanderson. She's known for having really, really pretty writing, and I wouldn't say it's like, you know, flowery, as I say, but it is a bit more on the dense side, and there are some sad bits and pieces that go on in this particular series, but also you kind of don't want to leave these characters behind. Luckily, The Realm of the Elderlings itself is quite a long series, so you don't have to leave the characters behind for too long, but there's a lot that goes on here. I didn't mind reading them back to back, but I think a lot of people do spread them out because of some of the sadder content, so keep that in mind. Maybe like me, you'll just want to read them all super quickly one after another, but otherwise you could spread these out too. And that's it. A little bit of a shorter video this time with just some series that I recommend taking your time with. Let me know if you have any recommendations for series to spread out over a period of time. And that's it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video and want to see more like this from me, then do think about hitting that subscribe button, and I hope to see you here again soon. Thanks. Bye.